You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network.
You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast, the most listened to daily Miami Dolphins podcast on the internet. Come on, Dolphins fans. Time to fins up.
All right, Miami! Miami's got the Dolphins, the greatest football team. We take the ball from goal to goal like no one's ever seen. We're in the air, we're on the ground, we're always in control. Hey, when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl. 'Cause we're the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins number one. Miami Dolphins.
Hello, Miami Dolphins fans. How are you today? And thank you for listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast as we start our draft preview show as we do each and every April, as I am joined by our in-house draft guru, Dante Collinelli. Dante, how you doing today?
Doing great. It feels good to be back. The Dolphins have a first-round pick for like the first time in 3 years, it feels like, at least. So it's good to get my job back. I missed it.
Well, we've done these shows the past
No,
couple years.
I know.
It just hasn't been fun because we've had
No.
no picks.
This will be
literally
a lot
had no
more fun.
picks.
This will be a
We've
lot more
spoken
fun.
about sleepers more than we, have talked about the guys at the top. And for those of you new to our draft preview show, here's what we do. We are not your typical draft preview show. We look at the Miami Dolphins roster, and we know they ain't taking a corner in round one. They're not taking a quarterback in round one, no matter what anyone says. They're not taking, some positions in round one. We will cover those positions, but we're not going to spend time on them. We know the needs. Offensive line, defensive line, wide receiver, even throw a little tight end. We're going to spend more time on the positions of need, less time on the positions that aren't of immediate need. Of course, anything can happen, but we're just trying to put our logic behind it. And each week we'll cover 2 or 3 positions till we get to the draft. And on this show, we will cover quarterbacks and wide receivers, tight ends, as we work our way through all the position groups in this 2024 draft. Before we get to any of that, as always, a big shout out to everyone listening at finheaven.com. Everyone go to finheaven.com, the largest Miami Dolphins message board on the internet. Also, a shout out to our friends at the I Am a Miami Dolphins fan Facebook page. If you're on Facebook, please be sure you are part of the I Am a Miami Dolphins fan Facebook page. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, whether Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, Podbean, Podchaser, subscribe. You won't want to miss any of the episodes we have coming up, not just of this podcast, but all the podcasts here at DolphinsTalk.com. And Dante, did you know the Jaylen Waddle Youth Football Camp is the place to be this summer? Join the Miami Dolphins Star on June 22nd in Fort Lauderdale for skill building, fun, and memories that will last a lifetime. Visit JaylenWaddleCamp.com and register while spots are still available. Each camper will receive a limited edition t-shirt, souvenir autograph, and a team photo with Jaylen. Check out JaylenWaddleCamp.com to learn more. That's JaylenWaddleCamp.com. See you on the field. This is open to boys and girls, grades 1 through 8. Oh. And before we get into the show, I just want to say thank you for everyone who chooses to listen to us here at DolphinsTalk.com and any of the shows we have on our network. We know you have a lot of podcast options, not just with the Dolphins, but across the board on any topic, on any subject matter. So thank you for joining us on any and all of our shows here at DolphinsTalk.com. We do appreciate it. All right. Position number 1, like we do every year, quarterback. Would you agree, Dante? I don't care what's on social media, the Dolphins aren't taking Michael Penix in round 1. They're not taking Bo Nix in round 1. They're not taking a quarterback in round 1. They're not taking a quarterback in round 2. If you believe any of that BS, that's on you. The Dolphins are not taking a quarterback in round 1 or 2. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree. I understand the thought process. People are disappointed with how the season ended and how the offense looked when the season ended. And I understand that. I don't think the idea in a vacuum is not worth considering, but it's just not the year. It's not the time. Tua is a good quarterback. You are not going to find somebody better than him where the Dolphins are picking, right? Like, we can just stop the conversation there. That's it. That's what it comes down to. You're not going to find somebody better at 21. Call it a day. Thank you.
And it's even more so than that. Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel have staked their names and reputation on Tua, and to move on from him or start the process of moving on from him the year after he led the league in passing yards makes them look like blithering idiots. It's just not going to happen. So it's Tua or bust for the Dolphins. They're going to give him a big payday this off some point, whenever, May, June, July. I don't know when it'll happen. And they're not taking a quarterback. Okay. With that said, we're still going to cover the position because maybe in the late rounds, as we say each year, it makes sense for most teams to take a quarterback in the draft, whether around 5, 6, 7, or someone undrafted. And there might be some guys there. But before we get to them, 1, 2, 3 quarterbacks are going off the board. We know that. Caleb Williams at 1, I think, is probably a lock. Then when it comes to 2 and 3, I think most people consensusly think Jayden Daniels going 2nd, Drake May going 3rd. It could go the opposite way. We don't know. But first question, who do you have at number 2? And is the gap between 2 and 3 big?
So predictively or like off of evaluation?
You answer any way you want.
Any way I want. Okay, so off of evaluation, my quarterback 1's Drake May. So I'm way out.
I'm with you on May. I love May.
I'm way out in left field there. Predictively, I still think it's going to be May. I'm not buying it, man. I'm not. I really like. I think he's really good. I think the tape is good. He's interviewed well. He had a really good pro day. I'm not buying the league doesn't like Drake May. Since when does the league not like tall dudes with cannon arms? Like, I don't move. Like, who can move? And he's mobile. He is a player who has command of the offense at the line of scrimmage. He's making calls. He's making adjustments. He's really good downfield. Most of his best throws are down the field. I think when you nitpick Drake May, you talk about inaccuracies in the short areas of the field, which not great, obviously, but it happens. Like, I'm very, very comfortable with the profile that Drake May has presented across 2 seasons. And I think a lot of people are getting way too caught up in the fact that he was statistically worse at UNC this year. UNC was statistically worse across the board. They're a worse football team. And to me, when I watch Drake May, when I watch the tape, and that's why you watch tape and you don't box score scout, is because you see the same player. He's the same guy. It's just a worse situation. I think a lot of what I just said can also be applied to Caleb. So I have those guys at 1 and 2. I don't really care who you have at Caleb and Drake, but to answer your second question, for me personally, there is a decently sized gap between where I have Drake May and Caleb Williams ranked and where I have Jayden Daniels ranked, who is my QB3. I think there's a lot to like with Jayden. A few things concern me. I don't have a lot of faith in 5th-year starters getting significantly better going to the NFL. That worries me. I think Jayden has developed and he's gotten better, and he deserves a lot of credit for that, but he's not going to get a better situation than he got at LSU this past year in the NFL. They have 2 wide receivers who we're probably going to talk about on this show. One of them has been mocked to Miami in the first round a few times. They're both very, very good football players. That offense was incredibly good, and he's a big reason for that. He deserves a ton of credit. I like Jayden Daniels. He's a good quarterback prospect, but to me, Drake May and Caleb Williams are up there as like elite quarterback prospects. And to me, Jayden Daniels is good. Now, I'm not buying the league hates Drake May thing. I don't get it. If this was, Bryce Young, I understood that a little bit last year, right? He's small. He's an outlier. He's unique. Drake May is like, he's built like the quarterback. Like, if you built a quarterback in a lab, they'd look like Drake May, Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, like in that same vein. And so to me, like, I'm not buying it, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Commanders wanted to go with Daniels. I mean, he's electric. He is a phenomenal athlete. He's a really good downfield passer as well. I think he's one of the few guys in this class who can go toe-to-toe with May and Williams in that category. And I think that's what kind of props him up over the Michael Penix's, Bo Nix's, JJ McCarthy's of the world. And, that's great. And I think he's worth a top 5 pick if the team wants to take him. But I don't know, Mike. I'm not buying the league hates the Drake, the
I don't
Drake
get
May
it. No, I live in
sense.
ACC country. So I saw May play a lot of games. And what I see with May is I see someone who will be a professional NFL quarterback. And his time in the NFL will probably be close to a straight line. Always be good. Now, I don't know if it'll be great, but he's always going to be good to, very good. Jaden Daniels, I will admit, might be on the same straight line, but he might have that potential to be like superstar, but we don't know. And his size kind of scares me a little bit, not too much, just how he's built, type of deal. But Drake
he takes
May,
hits like he's in a Looney Tunes movie, man.
Yeah, that's what scares me.
He gets thrown around like a rag.
That's what scares me.
It's rough sometimes, and I like Daniels.
I mean, I think all three of them are going to be fine, honestly. I like this class much more than I like last year's class by miles. Caleb Williams, watching USC play, and I think I mentioned him to you 2 years ago. Which everyone sort of did, but I go, this kid just makes wow throws at times. Like the arm talent is just now in the NFL, he's got to be a little bit more careful, can't be so risky with some of the throws. But I can see why he's going to go 1 because the questions about him are more off the field, makeup. The father's always talking, and does he have like the personality of Leo Lack? Like whatever. I don't know about that stuff. Just watching him play, I can see why he's going first, and I think on the Bears, they got a chance to be good quick. They got some wide receivers already. They have this pick and another pick inside the top 10 where they could go wide receiver to add another weapon for him. I think the Bears that's a great situation for whoever they take, probably Caleb Williams. So I like all three of these guys. And yeah, I like May, probably like you. I don't know if I like him 1, but I think he's number 2, but I think he's going to go 3. And I think it stinks because the Patriots are picking 3rd. He's probably going to fall in the Patriots' lap, but it is what it is. Yeah,
maybe that's why I just refuse to believe it because I don't want to have to root against the guy for the next 10 to 12 years.
It was true, though, but everything you said was right because North Carolina 2 years ago was awesome. And last year, the top wide receiver missed the first however many games. It was not as good as they were 2 years ago. And I know some people just look at, record standings, stats, like you said. But I like May a lot. Now, a couple of years ago, we spoke about on the show Desmond Ridder. And I said, Dante, explain not you, just the love affair most people have with Desmond. I watched Cincinnati football a lot. And they were a fine team in that little conference at the time they played in. And they even went to like I forget which bowl. It was like a way bigger bowl than they ever deserved to go to. I go, he makes plays, but it's uninspiring football. So please explain to me the passion with J.J. McCarthy, because to me, he's Desmond Ridder 2.0. I just don't get it. What are people like? Michigan ran the ball. It's like 8 yards a carry, and they asked him to do very little. And I don't understand the love affair with J.J. McCarthy, where you got multiple teams looking to trade up to make sure they get him as the 4th quarterback off the board.
Yeah, it's this is a challenging conversation. I like JJ better than I liked Desmond in 2021. I was not a Desmond Ridder guy at all. And I don't know if I'd call myself a JJ McCarthy guy either, but I like
him a little better though.
Yeah, I do think he's a little bit better. For me, so the league likes McCarthy because if you could cut out a Shanahan-style quarterback and dump in all the traits that you would want a Shanahan-style quarterback to have and perfectly build him to in the image of the Shanahan offense, it would be exactly JJ McCarthy. He is 6'2". He's got a little bit of scoot to him. He can fire the ball all over the field. He will do exactly what he's told on every single play. He runs the deep play action under center, crossing routes, dig routes, right? If you watch Michigan, they don't throw the ball a ton. When they do throw the ball, there's a lot of pro style concepts. It's the dude is running a watered down version of the Shanahan offense already. So if you're the Vikings, you lose Kirk Cousins free agency. You're not going to start Sam Darnold. I don't think, right? So you're not going to be able to get into the top 3 because like you and I think the league does like those 3 quarterbacks, no matter what anyone.
And it makes sense for those 3 teams. It does make sense for those 3.
Yes. And so what's the love affair with McCarthy? I think it's less of a love affair with McCarthy and more of a fact that there is, like usual, not enough demand or not enough supply for the demand at the quarterback position. So stepping aside of that, I think what you get with McCarthy, to me, and I've written about this a few times this year, he reminds me so much of Brock Purdy, man. And the 49ers have done a really good job building an offense around that type of player. And that type of player is going to be someone that NFL coaches really like, because the Shanahan tree is all over the place now. There's different variations of it. You have the McVay side of that tree that also is all over the place. All of those coaches are going to like him. Here's the thing with McCarthy. He's going to go out there. He's going to do exactly what you tell him to do on every play. If you tell him to throw the ball to the number 2 progression against this defense, that's where the ball's going to go, no matter what he sees post-snap. And there are positives and negatives to that. Now, to McCarthy's credit, I think that he has real traits that are going to make him a perfectly cromulent starting quarterback in the NFL. And I would bring up a few names that I think also fall into that category, but I don't want my head to get cut off on Twitter. So so I'll stick with Brock Purdy. Purdy does exactly what he's asked of on every play. He's a little bit athletic, right? He moves better than Jimmy G.
But he's got the best roster in football around him.
We're getting there.
Okay.
We're getting there, right? So that's McCarthy's ceiling, right? That's what he reminds me of, like a guy who's just going to come in, he's going to run the offense, he'll give you what you got, you'll win football games with him if you have a really good roster around him. And so my struggle with McCarthy is if they were talking about him as a late first round pick or an early second pick, right? Like when we saw Will Levis go last year, sure, fine. Okay. Trading into the top 5 for a player who I think probably caps out as the 15th best quarterback in the NFL. To me, that's his ceiling. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that player. Having the 15th best quarterback in the NFL can win you the damn Super Bowl. 49ers almost did it twice. All right. So you can do it. And I get why teams would want to do that. It's a better proposition than signing Gardner Minshew. No shade to Gardner Minshew. I can name 8 backups who got contracts this year. I'd rather have JJ McCarthy. But my point is that you can't take that player in the top 5, man. So I'm with you. I do not understand the hype. What the most recent report I saw is that New England really likes him at 3, which as a Dolphins fan,
oh my God,
sure.
Go for it, please.
Go for it. Yeah, sure. That's fine. But as a draft analyst, that hurts me inside because I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, because looking at the draft order, so we figure 1, 2, 3. Let's assume he doesn't go. 4, Arizona seems not to be interested in a quarterback there. Fine. Chargers won't. Giants at 6 is the wild card because there have been rumblings. The contract they paid to Jones, everyone thinks is wild, but it's easy to get out to as well now that they're a little bit into it. So it's the Giants at 6 are a wild card. So much of a wild card. Everyone is afraid what they might do. Everyone needs to jump the Giants. So that's why the Giants are the wild card, because nobody quite knows if they will move on from Jones or if they won't. I don't think they will. But you got, as you said, the Vikings, 11, 12, 13. Vikings, Broncos, Raiders. Those are the 3 who are probably going to be blowing up the phone of Arizona and the Chargers. And Arizona's already got 2 picks in round 1. If I'm correct. Yes, they do. And the Chargers are in the same division with the Broncos and the Raiders. So the Vikings, I think, would be the team that has the most ammunition, probably trade up to 5. Because I think Arizona probably wants one of those wide receivers, just to guess. To trade up to 5 with the Chargers. And if you're Jim Harbaugh, you can maybe get a haul, slide back, and you're off and running trying to fix the Chargers. But yeah, I mean, I think he's going to go top 5, which is crazy to me. Because again, good player, like you said, low ceiling. Michigan asked him to do nothing, and they won a bunch of games because they could run the ball 8 yards and play great defense so that nobody could score on.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm in the I'll believe it when I see it camp with McCarthy.
Well, he's going to go top 10 because I think the Vikings made that trade to get the second first-round pick for ammunition to move up to get a quarterback. If it's him or someone else, I have no idea. But they didn't make that trade to get that extra first-round pick to not get a quarterback because right now they don't have – I mean, yes, they got guys, but they don't have quarterbacks.
I agree. I feel like we're doing the Will Levis, Malik
That's
Willis
what it is, though.
thing.
That's how this league is, though. It's quarterbacks league.
But those guys did not go in the top 10, right? Will Levis was supposed to go number 2.
They're all going to fail doing this. They're all going to fail. Yeah. Bo Nix, Michael Penix. Now, I've seen people with Bo Nix who seems like he played at Auburn for 7 years and transferred to Oregon for 2. It feels like the kid must have a PhD in college. He was there for so long. And Michael Penix, who's also not exactly a spring chicken by quarterback standards and has, knee injuries in the past and stuff, whatever. Do you see one or both of those in round 1? Follow-up, If it is round 1, is it before or after pick 21?
Oh, if it is in round 1, it's before 21. I think if those guys come off the board, it's in
It'll
that
go to one of those
stretch.
3 teams.
Yeah, it's in that stretch that you mentioned earlier. I actually don't think either of them will be first round picks.
I mean, I think it's a reach.
I'll
for
be
both.
honest. I don't think either should be unequivocally. And I don't even hate either of them. I think both of them are fine. Like, sure. But they are not first round caliber quarterbacks to me. I don't think either of them are going to go in the first round. I really don't. I think the Raiders, I think they'd like to get a quarterback. I could totally see Antonio Pierce coming out with Gardner Minshew as a starter and running the ball 45 times in week 1. Like, that would not shock me in the slightest bit. Sean Payton is a total wild card. I have no idea what they're cooking in Denver. Their only quarterback's Jarrett Stidham right now. No clue.
He wants a quarterback. But I don't know if he wants to hitch his wagon
to Bo Nix at 12.
Or Michael Penix.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
now maybe he'll trade down to like 19 or 28 and take one who's there. I could totally see that because then he'll get more picks for sure. But I don't know that high when you got either A, he can take a very good player and worry about quarterback in round 2, or B, see if he can trade back however far, even if it's a spot or 2, get something and then take a quarterback there. To me, that would make the most sense with either, unless he like absolutely is in love with one of those 2 guys, which I don't know how anyone would be in love with either one of those 2 guys.
Yeah, I think they come off the board in the first like 5 picks of day 2, right? Like I think it's the Will Levis thing from last year, right? Or it's like, oh my God, this quarterback fell. And then they go immediately on day 2, right? Like Denver trades up on day 2 to like the 3rd pick in the 2nd round and they take Bo Nix. Like that would be my official prediction. I wouldn't be like shocked to see them go in the 1st round, but I can't imagine talking myself into those players in the top 15. I really couldn't.
Yeah, and round 2 at the top, which there would probably be trades. You do have Arizona, which would be the 3rd pick, and that's maybe where they take one there, just because you never really know with Kyler Murray. Raiders are 44. They could slide up from there probably easier and get somebody. Even Atlanta at 43. Well, no, they just paid Cousins all that money. The Saints at 45. I don't know what Carr's contract is. They could maybe get someone.
Speaking of teams, I don't know what they're doing.
Exactly. That's one team.
We could do a whole podcast on the Saints.
I think after the news last week, they're going offensive line because they got a lot of question marks now on the offensive line. I think that's what they're going to go. But yeah, probably. Up until that news from last week, I don't know. Okay, quarterbacks. Okay, after you get past those 5, is Spencer Rattler the next quarterback? Because I like him a little bit here. For a team, probably on Friday, I would guess. What are your thoughts on Spencer Rattler?
I think he's fine. I think he's a really solid mid-round quarterback option. I think he has an NFL arm. And so when you're dropping out of the 1st round, for me, it becomes a talent proposition at quarterback, right? Like, what can I develop? What do you bring to the table that I can't teach you? And for Rattler, it's arm talent. Now, I don't think he's got an elite arm, but I think it's above average. He can push the ball to all 3 levels. He can make throws off platform. He does a lot of really good things there. He's nimble in the pocket. I wouldn't call him like a running threat. I'm not even sure I'd call him mobile, but he can move. You know, he's not just a sitting duck back there. He can move. He can make throws on the run. He can avoid pressure in the pocket. You like those things. One of the things I really appreciate about Rattler's film, and I almost ranked him ahead of Michael Penix Jr. when I did my quarterback rankings, is because Rattler is short. He's not tall. I think he's like 6'1" off the top of my head. He hits the middle of the field really well for a shorter quarterback. And I really appreciate that because when you watch the Bryce Youngs, Kyler Murrays of the world, Kyler less so, but the Bryce Youngs, the Russell Wilsons of the world, they are just like incapable of seeing the middle of the field. And Spencer honestly sees the middle of the field pretty well. He threw some really, really nice balls in there. He can hit the dig routes. I think he's going to be like, to me, he's going to be a guy who probably goes on maybe like the late 2nd, early 3rd range. And I think he's a good backup. I think he comes in, he can win some football games for you. I don't think he's ever going to be a long-term starter. He's not quite that caliber of prospect, but I think the floor is good. And in a league where, look, quarterbacks are getting hurt a lot and you need a really good backup, I think that could be top like 60, 70 pick roughly. And that's not something that we used to say about backup quarterbacks. That's a rise in the rankings for those guys. So I like Rattler. I think he's got solid film.
Yeah, like a team that I don't want to help this team, but a team like the Jets, I know they don't have a pick in round 2, but like round 3, if he's sitting there, Rodgers ain't going to play forever. I first tell him, because we know how temperamental he could be. We might take a quarterback in round 3, so a year or 2 from now when you're gone, we have someone in the pipeline ready to go. A team like that would make sense on Friday of the draft to sort of take a Spencer Rattler with an older quarterback, maybe, just to have someone in the pipeline. 2 names before we get to some sleepers. One who would probably be much higher in this draft with the injuries, Jordan Travis, Florida State. Do you see him getting picked on Saturday, day 3, rounds 4, 5, 6, 7, or is the injury really going to harm him there? Had a hell of a year up until the injury.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think, so I was going to save this conversation for the sleeper conversation, but
that's fine. We're in that sleeper conversation.
Yeah, so problem with this year's quarterback class is that a lot of guys went back to school. There's actually not that many quarterbacks that I have draftable grades on. And when I released my quarterback rankings, I only released profiles on 7 guys. Now I've watched like 10, 11-ish, but there's really not that many guys who are going to have draftable grades. So I think somebody like Jordan Travis actually does get drafted. And I think he could go as early as like round 5. If a team views him as a backup quarterback at the next level, I think he could go that high. I'm not a big Jordan Travis guy, but I'm not going to sneeze at throwing darts at quarterbacks on day 3. I'd be throwing darts at quarterbacks on day 3 too, because if you hit, you're just the best GM who's ever lived and you have the cheapest quarterback contract of all time. Right. So I don't blame teams for that at all. I think Travis gets drafted. There's just not that many quarterbacks this year. A lot of guys and I'm not saying this is a good or a bad thing. It's just where we're at. NIL and transfer portal sent a lot of guys back to school. There were a lot of guys that I thought were going to come out or I think would have come out last year if they were in the same spot who just didn't. They transferred up or they transferred out, right? Like Cam Ward initially was going to come out and then he went back to school. I think he transferred to Miami, if I'm not mistaken.
He did.
Cam Rising at Utah, back to school. He's now going to be like his 7th year at Utah. Riley Leonard, who at Duke, he was a summer darling for a lot of us on draft Twitter. Didn't have the best season. He might have come out in previous years. He got hurt. He decided to transfer to Notre Dame. I don't blame him. I would have done the same thing, right? So like a lot of guys went back to school. I think that's going to push Jordan Travis's of the world like up the board. I think all those guys are going to go probably.
All right. So in your sleeper conversation, throw me a couple sleepers who, for Miami, they don't need a quarterback early, but as we always said, quarterback's one of those positions. If you take one every year, around 6 or 7, 5, 6, 7, it's never a bad pick because if you hit on it, you're set. I mean, it's like even if you hit on one just to be a number 2, that's huge because who wants to pay Mike White $9 million like we are? Nobody. But if you hit on a number 2 quarterback, it's great. So talk about sleepers and also, and I pray the Dolphins do not call this man's name. Talk to me about Tua's brother. Dolphins cannot draft him. That's all I'm saying. They cannot draft him.
Oh man. All right.
It's a PR nightmare. It's a PR nightmare they do.
My only quarterback that I'll talk about here as a sleeper would be Notre Dame's Sam Hartman. I don't think that he's good.
No, but he is exciting at times.
He reminds me a little bit of Skylar Thompson. And so I think Skylar Thompson's like a spunky number 3, number 2-ish quarterback.
Plays
and you
with
know
a lot
what?
of heart. Yep.
Yeah. Sam Hartman doesn't have a very good arm. He's not particularly mobile. I would not describe him as accurate, but you know what? He's gritty. He'll stand in the pocket and get smacked and deliver the football. He's not going to he threw some pretty bad interceptions. I was about to say he's not going to turn the ball over a ton. He threw some not good interceptions, but
he played with teams at Wake Forest that weren't great and he dragged them to big wins at times.
Yeah. I like I said, like, I think that's the only guy that we haven't talked about that I would care about. I do not. Joe Milton should be a tight end. I'm just that's the end of that conversation.
You can't throw it accurate.
Yeah, that's the end of that conversation for me. For Tua's brother, I had high hopes for him about 2 years ago, and that ship sailed. It's just I think has a weaker arm than his brother. And we get into a lot of debates about Tua's arm strength as is. And I think Tua's arm strength is okay. And I'll leave it at that. It's fine. It's NFL caliber. His brother's, to me, is weaker than that. And so that conversation ends. I think he's a limited athlete. I don't think that I think he's going to be a practice squad guy. I don't think he's going to make an NFL roster. And I don't mean this to be like a slight at him. I think he's going to have to go to like, what are they calling that now? The UFL.
UFL.
Yeah. If he performs there, he can work his way onto an NFL roster. But I don't think that he's going to get drafted. I'd be pretty surprised. He didn't get a combine invite. Guys who don't get combine invites, the odds of them getting drafted, and he had a bad pro day. So no combine invite, bad pro day. I would be floored if he gets drafted.
Yeah, I just know if the Dolphins bring him to camp or sign him as an undrafted free agent, the minute they let him go, this crazy ass fan base will lose their minds. Like, dude, we don't have to employ the family. You know what I mean? It's like, just let him go somewhere else. Just stay out of that mess, Miami. It's unnecessary PR that will not end well. All right, so that's our quarterbacks. Yeah, we'll see if Miami takes someone late. Mike White's final year of his deal. Skylar Thompson, I think kind of know what Skylar Thompson is. So it wouldn't be shocking if, around 5, 6, or 7, they took a quarterback to, get in the pipeline, as I always say, to maybe be a number 2 a year from now or something, if they show a little something in camp. And at this point, if they want to move on from a Skylar Thompson, it'd be fine because we kind of know what Skylar Thompson is. And with Mike White here, he ain't going to play anyways. And if he does play, we're screwed. Okay. On to wide receiver, as this is where we're going to spend some time. Position of need for the Dolphins. And if you don't think it's a position of need, you don't understand football. Yes, we have Hill and Waddle. I get it. After them, we have literally nothing. Braxton Barris is not a number 3. Eric Uzakama, nice kid, coming back from a major injury. We don't know. River Craycraft, not a number 3. And we saw at the end of last season, when Hill's playing less than 100% and Waddle's playing less than 100%, this offense struggles. It almost comes to a stop at times. They need a legitimate number 3. If they sign Odell Beckham or not, I have no idea. But we have to go into this draft, as of today, assuming they need a number 3 wide receiver. And they kind of need someone young because, newsflash, they haven't restructured Tyreek Hill's contract yet, and they probably won't because of the off-the-field drama. They're probably counting down the days like an inmate in prison, marking them off on the calendar to the day they maybe can move on from him. And with Jaylen Waddle, 5th-year option is about to come up here. They have to pick up in May. And well, hopefully we can resign him to a long-term deal, but we don't know. They might need someone to get, once again, in the pipeline to be a number 3 now, be a number 2 a year or 2 from now, probably 2 years from now. So this is why it's a need. Okay. Top 3, Harrison, Neighbors, and the kid from Washington whose name I always butchers. Odunze. Okay. Is it that order, or do you have Neighbors higher than Harrison?
Nope, that's the order for me. I don't get this. I feel the same way about the Drake May thing. Like I don't get it. Harrison is as good as you could possibly get. And I love Neighbors and Odunze. They're both very, very, very good prospects. They'll be gone way before Miami even races the clock. But for me, it's Marvin Harrison Jr. And I'll be honest, it's not particularly close on my board.
Yes.
I think he's the best receiver I've scouted in a long time.
He came out of the womb ready to do this, just like the old man.
Yeah.
And when you're hanging around a Hall of Fame wide receiver father your whole life, probably hung out at the Indianapolis facility his whole life and just played around and just was on the field with him doing that stuff, you're going to turn into this, and it's in his blood, it's in his genes. You can make a case out of the first 6 picks, 3 will be quarterbacks, 3 will be wide receivers, because at 4, 5, 6, I don't know how, if you are Arizona, take a wide receiver. Chargers just lost a receiver. Not that they need to take one, but they kind of have some tackles. They kind of got some players on the air. Like, why wouldn't you pass up on someone like Neighbors just to put them out there, especially since you just lost Keenan Allen and Mike Williams? And then the Giants just need any bit of spark on offense. So, in your eyes, like many, is it like quarterback, wide receiver, the top 6? Most likely?
It could be. Yeah, I think maybe a tackle. Trades up
for quarterback then.
Yeah, I think you either get a quarterback trade up and it's 4 quarterbacks, or like maybe a tackle sneaks in because Jim Harbaugh wants to run the ball, right? Like, I don't know, maybe. But I think, like, if you look at my overall board for this class, it's wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, which we'll talk about later, offensive tackle, wide receiver, right? So, like, it would not surprise me if those are the top 6 picks at all.
All right. Now, after those 3 wide receivers is the kid I love out of LSU, Brian Thomas Jr. And I think he's like the number 4th wide receiver. And I think there's a gap between him and the next bunch. Is he your number 4 wide receiver? And whoever you got number 5, how big is that gap?
So he is my number 4 wide receiver. The gap between him and my 5 and 6 is not that big. There is a small gap. I do think that Brian Thomas Jr. is, I would say, comfortably the 4th best receiver prospect in this class. I'll have a Dolphins-centered scouting report for him coming out. I actually just wrote it today, so this is fresh on the mind, which is good. I love his fit with the Dolphins.
Me too.
I think that so to me, he's like kind of the perfect fit because he gives you what you already have, right? He ran a 4.33 at 6'4", 200 plus pounds, which, I mean, good Lord, man, that dude, buddy was flying. So he gives you the speed, right, that you like. He can do all the nifty timing routes and the over the middle stuff and the bread and butter of the Dolphins offense, right? But what the focus of this offseason has been for me as an analyst is trying to project how the Dolphins can like throw change-ups at other teams, right? Because good teams are just, if we stop this one thing, if we stop these few concepts, we're going to make the Dolphins' life hell. And so when I look at Brian Thomas Jr., and I see somebody who's 6'4" and who like vertically is very good, that to me is like a new element that you can introduce to this offense. And I think he also gives you what you already have, right? So he's a fit for what you already do. And then he gives you a little bit more. Like there's just nobody on this team who can win a jump ball. Like just not a single person.
Nope.
And I'm not going to sit here and act like I think throwing jump balls is a good thing to do, but yeah, you got to have some ball winners in the receiver room at some point. Like I'm not saying it's going to be like, prime Devontae Parker out there, but like someone's got to win a contested catch at some point. Like that's how it works in the playoffs, man. So to me, like Thomas Jr. can be that guy, and that's what's really appealing about him. I think what worries you about him is that he's a late breakout, right? He really only has the 1 year of production. Now, I would push back on that a bit. He was a starter as a freshman at LSU. They didn't produce a ton because the team was bad, but I don't know, man. Freshman starter in an SEC program, like that's enough to kind of make me think that he's a dude, and he's always been a guy, and he finally grew with Jaden Daniels, and they figured it out this year, and like, sure. So I really like him. You worry about the lack of experience. You worry about the lack of breakout. He doesn't see a lot of press coverage. How is he going to deal with corners being physical with him? You like the quickness. You like the body comp. Can he apply that effectively, right, to beat press coverage? I don't know the answer to that. That's a gap in his film. But overall, I really like Brian Thomas Jr. He just missed a first-round grade for me. And for reference, I don't hand out first-round grades to 32 players. I usually give about 15 to 18 of those out a year. I try to hold those at a very high standard. He's like my 20th overall player-ish. So I think he's going to fall right into that 15 to 21 range. I'd honestly be kind of surprised if he made it past that.
Yeah, I would too, because there's a lot of teams in round 1. Because those 3 are going to go flying up. The top 3 are going to go flying off the board. Yep. And the conversation of what does Miami do? Like they have 3 distinct needs: offensive line, wide receiver, and the replacements for Wilkins and Raekwon on that line. And, there's a segment of the fan base that just, they cannot wrap their head around how you can see wide receivers in need. And it's not that, they're going to draft a wide receiver to start like they would maybe with an offensive lineman who's going to start at left guard or right guard, or on the other side who would, start at nose tackle or end in a 3-4. It's just that we saw last year how the offense crumbled without any depth at wide receiver. And why Brian Thomas, I think, to Miami, like if he gets picked by Jacksonville, they're going to ask him to start right away, be a 1 right away. If he comes to Miami, he's their 3rd wide receiver. Yes, he'll be on the field a lot, but they're not going to ask him to do with Hill and Waddle. He's going to get targets, but not nearly as much as if he goes to Jacksonville or Pittsburgh or a team picking above Miami who's going to expect him to come in and be a 1 or a 2 day 1 and produce. In Miami, if they were, and here's the thing. I really don't want Miami to take a wide receiver 21 unless it's him. Assuming the top 3 are off the board. If it's not him, wait till 55. You'll get a very good wide receiver there, I think. But if he's there at 21, I don't care who the offensive linemen are. I don't care who the edge rushers, who the defensive tackles are. If he's there at 21, it's tough to walk away from this kid because A, it's an offensive league. B, let's be honest, we're in the AFC. If you're going to beat the Chiefs, you better be ready to win a shootout with the Chiefs at some point. That's just, I know it's tough. I know the odds are slim, but you got to try. I mean, you gotta try, I guess. And you better be able to, on paper, at least think you have a chance to win the shootout with him. And this kid, not, Troy Franklin, not Xavier Worthy, not Mitchell, who we're going to talk about next. This kid at 21, I would not be mad. If it's one of those other three, I'd probably be like, I don't know. I might take maybe take an offensive tackle, play him 1 year at guard, then slide him out to replace Armstead. But this kid, I think he's that special. I mean, and plus, let's just be honest. LSU and Ohio State have turned into wide receiver factories. You take one early from those two schools, odds are you're getting someone who's going to be really, really good at the next level.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say about Thomas is that I think a lot of people are looking at the wide receiver position as a this year problem. I think it's also a long-term problem. You alluded to this earlier with Tyreek Hill, and you alluded to the off-field, which is also
He's
a
nuts.
consideration.
He's a lunatic. You can't trust him.
Also a consideration. But he's also talked about retirement recently too, right? It's not out of the realm of possibility that he's only going to play for 2 more years. And Jaylen Waddle has a 5th-year option that you're definitely going to take out, but also you have to extend him, right? And so drafting another receiver in an offense that cares a lot about receiver, right? You are an offense that extenuates the playmaking of your receivers. Having a consistent next man up mentality in that room specifically is going to be important for Miami, because you're about to get very, very heavy payroll with Tua. You're about to get very, very heavy payroll with Jaylen Waddle. Jalen Phillips is going to need a new contract soon. That's, kind of why they let a lot of guys go this year, right? They're prepping to pay those contracts, which is good. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have done that, but you got to get cheap labor somewhere at receiver at some point, because Tyreek Hill is either going to cost you $1 billion or he's going to retire, or you're going to have to keep restructuring his deal every year, which I don't think anyone wants to do. I don't think he wants to do that. So this is a need. And I agree with you. I think Brian Thomas Jr. would be probably the only one that I would like at 21. You could talk me into a few others, but I think this would be one that would need a lot of convincing.
Yeah, and the thing that Miami could have done this offseason, and they still could do it, they needed to obviously clear a lot of salary cap space. They did it with Armstead, restructured his deal, opened up cap space. They did it with Ramsey, restructured his deal, opened up cap space. They did it with Chubb, who's not even going to play much this year, restructured his deal, opened up cap space. The one player they did not do it with is Tyreek Hill. Now, they could do it at any moment. Maybe by the time I'm recording, the time this airs, they restructured him. We have to, I don't say this with glee. The man has an off-the-field issue every other week. And I think they want to protect themselves against, if the next time he does something wild, or the next time there's a wild accusation, there might be a league suspension, or they don't want to be tied to him any longer than they currently are. And it does tie up with Waddle to where when Tyreek's contract's up, that's when, if it's not done prior, you pay Waddle. Great. Waddle's now your 1A instead of being the 1B. But who's going to be next to him in an offense that is predicated on the wide receivers? You can sign all the tight ends in the world. This is a wide receiver offense. And right now we got 2. And I think having a third, if it's not Thomas at 21, which I don't think it will be, but I hope it is. I think he's going to be gone by 21. But if it is him, fine. If it's not, then we start looking at pick 55, round 2. After Thomas, I'm going to throw out a bunch of names. We got Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, Troy Franklin, guys who most people think are going to go somewhere in round 1. Are those your next 3?
So Mitchell's my next one. And then I actually have a run of different players before I get to Worthy and Franklin. I'll be brief because, we're 45 minutes in and we're still in the middle of the receiver. So I'll be brief here. I like Mitchell. I think he is stylistically very, very similar to Brian Thomas Jr. He's not quite as fast, but I think he's better at changing directions. So you kind of have a little bit of give and take there. I think what you like about Thomas is that he's just like a more consistent player. Mitchell's had a weird college career, wasn't very productive at Georgia, really was middlingly productive at Texas this year. That's because Quinn Ewers can't hit the broadside of a barn with a football, but I digress. I think Mitchell's a very good player. I think he's a back-end round 1 guy. He'd be the guy that you could talk me into for Miami. I'm close. I could get there, but probably not. The next guy for me is Georgia's Ladd McConkey. I just think dude's a good football player. I don't really I could sit here and talk about his route running for an hour. I just think he's a good route runner. He's fast. He catches everything. He's tough. Doesn't have a high ceiling. Not going to win a jump ball for you. there's limitations to his game. I think he's a good football player. I think he just comes in, he produces. He's going to give you somewhere from 850 to 1,100 yards every year, and then he's healthy. I think you worry a little bit about the injuries. He's kind of just been dinged up. Nothing major, but he's been dinged up through the years. So he's my next guy. And then the next one is like probably the guy that I would consider to be like the biggest, like I have no idea what to do with, and that's Keon Coleman from Florida State.
Say that name.
Yeah, because
there are when you have the speed.
Yeah, there are reps where like he just looks like prime Calvin Johnson against some of those ACC corners, and then there are other reps where he looks like, I don't know, the other Detroit receivers who played with Calvin Johnson that I can't even name, right? Like it's just like there are really high highs with him and there are really low lows. I think you like the size. I think you like the play speed. I know he ran a bad 40, but like when you watch him play, he doesn't play slow. He doesn't look slow. He's just tall. It takes him a minute to get there. And so, but I like Keon Coleman. I've got a nice second round grade on him. He's going to be like a top 30-ish, 35 player for me. I think he's got a bright future if he can put it together. I'm just a little bit worried about the floor. After that is when I get into the Xavier Worthy, Troy Franklins of the world, who have been getting mocked to Miami because they're fast. And like, I get it. They are fast. I'm not denying that. Xavier Worthy is maybe the fastest player of all time, depending on how you view combine times relative to play speed. Worthy for me is not a player that I would ever consider drafting in the first round. I'm not going to get there. And that is not a slight to him. Like you want to talk about him at pick 55, sign me up. We'll have a full conversation. I can totally get behind that. That's fine. You cannot take a player with that profile at 21. Like he's too small, man. He's too small. He is built like a string bean. And I'm not going to get there with taking him at 21. He's really fast. He's a good route runner. I have some other concerns about his game too. He doesn't catch the ball overly well. He's got some drops on tape that I don't love. The size profile does worry me. How is he going to handle press coverage? You know, how specialized are you going to have to get with scheming him open? Now, to the Dolphins' credit, if any team is going to figure that out, it's going to be the Dolphins. So, like, I get it. The fit makes sense. I'm not arguing the fit is good. The fit is great. Probably the best fit in the NFL for Xavier Worthy is probably Miami. I'm just not going to get there at 21. Troy Franklin is a cool player. He's more of a traditional deep threat, right? Where, like, Worthy's more of a zigzag type guy. You know, Franklin, it's just like, look, dude, line up, run in a straight line as fast as humanly possible, and we're going to chuck you the ball, and you're going to go get it. And that's great. That's a nice profile. I think he's a solid route runner. I have the same concern, dude. He's rail thin, man. He is so thin. He looks like a pole on the field, on the field, man. It's really worrisome. He's like, I'm going to look it up. He's like sub 200-ish. Like it's not.
That's not what Miami kind of needs, though.
No, like
some height. They need some bulk. They need like a larger guy would be nice. Like if it's someone like Xavier Worthy at pick 55, yeah, fine, sign me up. But again, in general, it'd be nice to have our top two wide receivers are short and fast, which is fine because they're great. But to have like someone else with a little bit of height, so you can throw like a jump ball every now and then. Or they can go up there like high point a ball.
We're gonna play a game. It's called Guess What Weight Percentile This Receiver's in.
God.
Troy Franklin is 176 pounds. Guess what percentile that ranks in among wide receivers since 1999?
I don't even want to guess. Is it like 99? What is it?
It's one. The other way. You were close. Way. Yeah, okay. It's the other way. So he's first percentile outlier in weight. Guess who else is first percentile outlier in weight? Xavier Worthy at 165 and 5'11". So like when we talk about guys being small, there's a difference between being small and being like
little.
Yeah, you are like the smallest person ever to do this, right? Like there is a scale of small. These guys are smaller than small. And so that is worrisome. And they're good football players. You can talk me into them at 55. They take Troy Franklin, Xavier Worthy at 55. You're not going to hear a peep from me. I'll sing that pick, praises till the cows come home. Sure. Yeah.
Now, most mocks have those guys gone before 55. Yeah. So let's just play off most of the mocks, which I know is dumb, but let's just play off that. At pick 50, say the Dolphins go either offensive line or like Murphy at like pick 21, whatever, something like that. Pick 55. If they took a Keon Coleman, a Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette, someone in that realm, would you say, fine pick, good pick at 55?
Absolutely. Yeah. All three of those guys are top 50 players on my board. This is a great receiver class. Like I think
that's why if it's not Brian Thomas, I'm fine waiting to 55 to get the receiver there.
I agree. I don't think you need to force a receiver pick at any point in this draft. I think you could go into the 5th round. I've watched 23 receivers. I'm going to watch 2 more to push to 25, and I'm going to have like 20 of them graded with day 2 grades, which means I haven't even like gotten to the day 3 guys.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to find receiver talent at any point in this draft. I think Coleman kind of brings the like tall, like win a jump ball aspect that we were talking about Brian Thomas that we think that they need. Leggett is like another guy who I think his best fit is probably Miami or San Francisco, right? Like he needs to
Miami a ton. Yeah.
Yeah. He needs to be like schemed open and schemed into space to be an effective player. But when he is in space, like it's kind of hard to find guys who run as quickly as he does at 6'1". So really interesting players. I'm with you. I think all those guys would be really good picks at 55.
Yeah. And any wide receiver that gets picked by Miami in round 1 or 2, get on your knees and thank God, because you are walking into the best situation any wide receiver could walk into, knowing they're not going to be looked at as someone they need to produce a lot. You're walking into maybe one of the best with like the Eagles and Bengals, one of the best situations you could walk into. So that's great. Now, tight ends, we're not spent a ton of time on because there's only like 3 we're talking about, I think. Any sleeper wide receivers, either, round 5 on, undrafted, someone, if Miami goes like offensive line round 2 and someone else in round 1, like who's someone they're going to wait on wide receiver, round 5 on, undrafted, 1 or 2 guys that might be in the mix. That makes sense.
So I got a round 5 guy that I like is Jamari Thrash from Louisville, who you're probably familiar with from the ACC. Another small, quick guy, fits Miami's scheme. I don't think he has blazing speed, but he is fast. He can get vertical on you. He can stack and separate. I think what you like about him is his ability to create off of manufactured touches, right? Like this is guy you're running reverses to, jet passes, bubble screens. He has appealing returner traits for me. And when we're talking about day 3 wide receivers with the new kickoff rule, that is something that I care significantly more about this year than I did in previous years, because you could stick a traffic cone back there and get a 20 whatever yard average on kickoffs. So that's nice. So I think Thrash has some juice there. The real like deep sleeper is Jaylen Cocker from Holy Cross. He is a real deep pull. He's 6'1", 208. Had a nice combine. He didn't run particularly fast. He's not fast. He ran a 4.57 40, which isn't great, but he jumped really well. 42.5-inch vertical, 98th percentile, which is like really good. He's very explosive. And when you watch him on tape, like he's a jump ball winner, dude. He just goes up and wins the football. He's physical. He's a big dude. I would throw a dart on him at day 3. I just think he's got the profile to be a receiver who's a contributing member, right? Like I don't think you're ever going to want him out there for more than like, I don't know, 50% of the snaps, but hey, go win me a jump ball in the red zone. Sign me up, go battle with L'Jarius Sneed downfield and just be a big person and win the football. I think he's got some juice. So I like him. I think he plays faster than that 4.57, not a ton, but I think he's probably closer to like 4.5 flat. I wouldn't look too much into that. So he's my like deep sleeper. I like Thrash as like a 4th wide receiver, almost like a Braxton Berrios replacement, but that's an NFL player. And with the kickoff rule, hopefully that guy will get a little bit more chance to shine.
All right. Now tight ends here as we wrap up. Brock Bowers, we know, is 1st round, number 1 tight end, not even close. Yep. So the 2 questions. Does he get out of the top 10, number 1? And comparing him to other tight ends the past 2 drafts, is he the best tight end in the past 3 drafts combined?
Oof. So to your first question, I don't think he should get out of the top 10.
I think the Jets are probably going to take him if he's there, which they should, honestly.
I agree. I think they should. I have a really hard time believing Joe Douglas, who came up in the Eagles organization, is going to take a tight end around 1 in the top 10. I agree. I would take him. I'd run the card to the podium and I wouldn't care. But I think Joe Douglas cares. I'd be shocked if the Jets took him. I'm going to be honest. I would do it. I hope they do it. From the perspective of, I think that's a really fun fit. As a Dolphins fan, I'd prefer not to have to watch him.
Chicago at 9, I guess. Tennessee at 7.
No, I don't
Tennessee
think so.
Needs a tackle.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So he might fall out of the top 10 then.
I think, yeah, that's what I was about to say. Like, I think he does fall out of the top 10.
Okay.
I think that ends up happening because of positional value. Now, to answer your second question, Brock Bowers has the highest tight end grade I've ever given out. I started doing this in 2018. That was my first year. I have never given out a higher grade to a tight end than I gave to Brock Bowers this year. He was my number one overall player for a non-insignificant portion of the season. I think that he is as good as it gets at tight end. I think he's a better prospect than Kyle Pitts, barely, but I do think he's a better prospect than Kyle Pitts. And I think he's going to suffer from Kyle Pitts not panning out. I think teams are not going to draft him because Arthur Smith didn't throw Kyle Pitts the football. So I really like Bowers. I think he should go top 10. I think he's the best tight end I've ever scouted. I don't think he's going to go. I think, like, honestly, I think the first team that I feel good about taking him is like Indy at 15. Like that's where I think it starts for me, barring a trade up, right? Like if I'm the Bengals, I'd be calling everyone and
exactly
whoever to get up to like 14 and take Brock Bowers and be like, all right, got Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Brock Bowers for a year. Let's cook. That's what I would do.
Exactly.
But I don't think that's going to happen. I think he falls.
Yeah, it's shocking because, he is so good. But this draft with so many quarterbacks in the top, the wide receivers being so good, he's going to fall. And just how it falls off, teams like the Titans really need an offensive tackle. Some other teams who might like roll the dice on him just have larger needs elsewhere. So there's that. The second tight end, Sanders from Texas. I think most people have him second. There was a report, Chris Grier, Mike McDaniel went to the Texas Pro Day, and they were really interested in him. Mind you, there's 2 wide receivers. Wide receivers are in need, and 2 defensive linemen. Defense. That to me was the biggest smoke screen ever thrown out. The Dolphins went there. We got 4 players at 2 positions of need, but we're looking at the tight end after we just paid a tight end. Still have Smythe, sign another tight end. They're not looking at the tight end. Now, I might be able to have egg on my face in a month, but he's the second best tight end. Is he someone who should go in round 2 and would it make sense for Miami if they did?
Oof. Okay, so
I would take a tight end, but that's me. Nobody listens.
So, to me. I don't think the Dolphins care about tight end.
Me neither. Why?
I really don't. If you were going to take a tight end, it was last year. Last year was the year.
There's 5 of them.
Yeah, there was like 7 dudes who contributed last year, and we knew all of them were good months before the draft. Sam Laporta being good surprised nobody. That was not a surprise. Musgrave, not a surprise. Kraft, not a surprise. I know to a lesser degree, but Michael Mayer in Las Vegas when he was healthy was the starting tight end. That surprised nobody. Last year was the year. That was the year you were going to take a tight end. You took Cam Smith, which is fine. This is not the year. I would not take Davion Sanders in the second round. I have a day 3 grade on him. I don't think he's going to go on day 3 because the tight end class is bad. And I think that his tape is like, okay. So I think he's going to get pushed up a little bit. My concern with Sanders is that like your whole game is being athletic and you did not test good. And that scares me. No, like sometimes it's just that simple. Like you're supposed to be fast and you're not. That worries me. Like I don't know what else to say besides that. Like he can't block. Like there's not even a conversation to be had. Other analysts are going to say that he can block. I don't think he can block at the NFL level. If you want to put him as an H-back and you want to get him on the move, sure. I mean, Durham Smythe blocks better than I ever thought he would at Notre Dame.
But not at 55 if you're the Dolphins.
Yeah, not at 55. So I would not take Jatavion Sanders there. And honestly, I'm not 100% convinced he's going to go in the second round. His tape at Texas is fine. I was underwhelmed. I really was not overly impressed.
Are there any tight ends? Because here's the deal. I don't think it's a need position after what they've done this offseason at tight end. But let's say like late rounds, round 5 on, because obviously no picks in rounds 3 and 4 unless they make a trade back and gain one. Round 5 on, is there anyone you say that guy's interesting? Maybe take a flyer on him because you got nothing to lose once you get to those rounds. Anyone who interests you? There's
a few guys. I like the day 3 depth of this tight end class, which is nice. The top end's not good. Ben Sinnott from Kansas State's really interesting. He is like the quintessential Shanahan tight end, right? Like he's a move piece. You want him to move before the snap. You know, he's going to run a lot of split zone action for you, line up in the backfield, line up in line. He can play a little bit of the slot. He tested really well. He looks quick and fast on tape, which is good. So the tape matches the testing, which we love. He's got a decent profile. He catches the ball. He's tough. I think he's can develop into a functional blocker. I'm a lot higher on his ability to develop as a blocker. I have no idea where he gets drafted because he tested out of this world. So if a team's sitting there in round 3, Sanders is off the board, I wouldn't shock me if Sanat's just TE3 off the board and at pick 65 to 75. I have no idea where this tight end class goes. It's very weird. I don't know when the run's going to start. I don't know who tight end 2 is. Another name is AJ Barner from Michigan. He's a blocker. You take him in round 6, you take him in round 7, you let him block for you. He plays special teams. I think he makes your roster. I think he makes your practice squad. And you know what? When you're talking about 6th or 7th round picks, that's where my mind goes, is who's going to contribute on special teams, and then what specialized role can they fill for you on offense. I think AJ Barner's a blocker. He comes in on 3 tight end sets. You do the tush push with him, maybe. I don't know, but he's a big dude. He blocks. Sure. Sign me up. So those would be the 2 guys that come to mind. The only other tight end that I legitimately like a little bit in this class is Penn State's Theo Johnson. His tape was pretty good. He's athletic. He's big. He can catch the football. I thought he got a lot better as a blocker this past season. I thought he improved his hand placement, his power. He can move guys off the line. He's besides Bowers, and there's the gap between Bowers and Johnson on my board is the Grand Canyon. It looks ridiculous visually staring at it right now. With just all the tight ends highlighted, I actually have to scroll to find the next one. It looks ridiculous. But Johnson to me is the only other guy that I think could be an every down player at some point. It's going to take some development to get there, but I don't know. He's a worthy flyer in the 3rd or 4th round. It's a weird group. The depth on day 3 is fine. The top of the class just isn't very good. I don't think we're going to hear a lot of tight ends names called early.
No, I mean, after Brock Bowers, honestly, like we said, there's nobody. So it's if you're Miami, they made their moves at tight end this offseason with a guy from Kansas City and Jody Fortson, who is that big red zone guy who can just, primarily block. And Jonnu Smith was brought in for everything he brings to the table as an actual receiver. So I think they got their tight end there. They sort of checked that box. I don't see a tight end. No, around 5, 6, 7, whatever. That's just more taking flyers on guys because you don't love anyone else really. It could happen. But overall, I think tight end. But yeah, I think what we said at wide receiver really is what I wanted to hone in on this show, because there's a very good chance, most likely at 55, but it's possible 21, the Dolphins are going to take a wide receiver. And I think if they sign Odell Beckham, that doesn't change that, because Odell Beckham's a 1-year Band-Aid. That's just a 1-year deal. A lot of the moves Miami made, not a lot, most of the moves, when it comes to Shaq Barrett, 1-year Band-Aid. Jordan Poyer, 1-year Band-Aid. The 5 guys they signed on the line who are 5 career backups, 1-year Band-Aids, and half of them won't even make the roster. And if they did sign an Odell Beckham, it's a 1-year Band-Aid. They need something more long-term for all the reasons we said, more long-term to get in the pipeline, to be integrated in this offense and contribute now, but really contribute a year or 2 from now and be a major factor. So that's why we covered it on this show. Next week, we'll do running backs and offensive line. Probably spend about 3 minutes on running backs, and the majority of the show is going to be offensive line, because we know the Dolphins need a tackle of the future. They need a guard. You can go center and slide over Aaron Brewer. We're going to cover the offensive line, because there's a very good chance the offensive lineman, although after what they did today, re-signing Kendall Lamb, after they did last week, re-signing Isaiah Wynn, when Chris Grier says you're more worried about the offensive line than we are, he ain't lying. So I don't even know if I think right now, gun to my head today, round 1, defensive line, round 2, wide receiver, and everyone screaming offensive line is going to be screaming it because Chris Grier is going to be go screw. I told you last year we're not worried about it. We're just bringing the band back together for the most part.
I agree. It was funny because I was writing a bunch of scouting reports today, and I did 4 offensive linemen, and I got to the end, and I was like, I don't think they're going to take any of these guys. And I wrote these, 1,000-word pieces about why I would take this guy and why I think the offensive line's a huge need, and we'll get into it on the next show.
If the right tackle fell, which I don't think they will, but if the right guy fell, I think he has to take it, knowing this is Armstead's final year. And play him 1 year at guard like they did with Laramie Tunsil, kick him out next year. Tackle, you got the 5th-year option on him, control him. That would make sense. But, people think they're taking Barton or Jackson Powers Johnson, who, FYI, he can't snap the ball either, folks. Taking some of these other guys in around, I just don't see it happening. The kid from Washington, he's great, but we have no defensive line. We have one guy.
Yeah,
Zach
I don't
how
feel good about it.
Defensive. No, I think he has to go defensive line. We'll talk about that more next week. Yep. Dante, everyone follow him on Twitter at Dante Collinelli. Read your work at Sports Illustrated, All Dolphins, and every now and then he writes something for us too here at DolphinsTalk.com. So you can follow me on Twitter at DolphinsTalk. We'll be back next week with show number 2, offensive line and the running backs. Thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you again. Folks, don't forget, we must put an end to highway profanity.